The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty marketplace of Willow Creek, a frontier town that had seen better days. It was August 1878, and the drought had turned the earth into cracked clay, mirroring the broken spirits of those who called this place home. The air hung thick with dust and desperation, carrying the stench of sweat, cattle, and crushed dreams. Among the weathered wooden buildings and makeshift stalls, a crowd had gathered near the town square. Their faces bore the hard lines of frontier life ranchers with sun-baked skin, merchants counting their meager profits, and drifters seeking their next opportunity. But today, they weren't here for cattle or grain. They were here for something far more degrading. Sarah Bennett stood on a makeshift platform, her wrists bound with rough rope that chafed against her pale skin. At 23, she should have been married with children, tending to a home of her own. Instead, she stood before the leering crowd like livestock at auction, her emerald eyes refusing to shed the tears that threatened to fall. Her auburn hair, once her pride, hung limp and tangled around her shoulders. The simple calico dress she wore was clean but threadbare, a testament to whatever dignity she'd managed to preserve. "Gentlemen," bellowed Jake Morrison, the town's self-appointed auctioneer and owner of the largest saloon. His belly strained against his vest as he gestured dramatically. "What we have here is prime merchandise, young, healthy, and with all her teeth, her family's debts need settling, and she's the payment." The crowd chuckled and whistled. Some men elbowed each other, making crude jokes that carried on the wind. Sarah's jaw clenched, but she kept her chin high. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness in this world only invited more cruelty. "She can cook, clean, and she's got gentle hands for mending," Morrison continued, warming to his pitch. "Who'll start the bidding at $50? "I'll give you 30, shouted a toothless prospector from the back. "That's all any woman's worth." More laughter rippled through the crowd. Sarah's fingernails dug into her palms, leaving crescent marks in the flesh. 3 months ago, she'd been helping her father tend their small farm. Then the drought came, the crops failed, and the debts piled up. When her father died of a heart attack, the creditors descended like vultures. With no male relatives to protect her and no means to pay, she became the settlement. $30, Morrison scoffed. "You insult me. Sir, this girl's worth at least—" "That's enough." The voice cut through the noise like a knife through butter, deep, controlled, and carrying an authority that made heads turn. The crowd parted as a man stepped forward, his spurs jangling with each measured step. Ethan Rollins was not a man easily forgotten. Standing well over 6 feet, with shoulders broadened by years of hard labor, he commanded attention without trying. His face was weathered but handsome, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw covered by several days' worth of stubble. Dark hair peeked out from under his worn Stetson, and his eyes, gray as a storm cloud, surveyed the scene with barely concealed disgust. He was known throughout the county as one of the wealthiest ranchers, owning the sprawling Double R Ranch with its thousands of head of cattle, but wealth hadn't softened him. If anything, the loss of his wife 5 years prior in a brutal raid had only hardened the edges that frontier life had already sharpened. "Mr. Rollins." Morrison's voice cracked slightly. Everyone knew Ethan Rollins, and everyone knew not to cross him. "I didn't expect to see you here today. Perhaps you're in need of household help." Ethan's gaze moved from Morrison to Sarah, studying her with an intensity that made her want to shrink back. But she didn't. Instead, she met his stare head-on, surprising them both. "How much?" Ethan asked, his voice flat. Morrison's eyes gleamed with greed. "Well, for a man of your means, I'd say—" "How much to end this spectacle?" Ethan clarified, his tone dropping to a dangerous level. The crowd had gone silent now, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Morrison swallowed hard. $200 would clear her family's debts entirely. Without hesitation, Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He tossed it to Morrison, who caught it with fumbling hands. The weight of it made his eyes widen. "There's 300. The extra 100 is for you to never conduct this type of business in my presence again." Ethan's voice carried a threat that needed no elaboration. Morrison nodded quickly, untying Sarah's wrists with shaking fingers. "Of course, Mr. Rollins, she's all yours." Sarah rubbed her wrists. The rope burned stinging in the dry air. She stepped down from the platform on unsteady legs, unsure whether she'd just been saved or traded to a different kind of hell. The crowd dispersed quickly, not wanting to linger under Ethan Rollins' cold gaze. "Can you ride?" Ethan asked her, his tone giving nothing away. "Yes," Sarah answered, her voice hoarse from the dust and suppressed emotion. "Good. My wagon's outside. Get in." He turned and walked away without checking to see if she followed. Sarah had no choice but to comply. As she climbed into the well-maintained wagon, she noticed 4 sets of eyes watching her from the back. Children, ranging from what looked like 6 to 12 years old. They stared at her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Ethan climbed up to the driver's seat and took the reins. As they pulled away from town, Sarah finally spoke. "Why?" He didn't look at her. "Why what?" "Why did you buy me? You don't seem like the type who needs to purchase women." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "I didn't buy you. I paid your debts. There's a difference." "Is there? I'm still going with you. I still have no choice." Now he did glance at her, and something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. "You always have a choice. Miss Bennett, you can leave whenever you wish. But where would you go back to that platform, to the saloons, or maybe you'd try your luck alone on the frontier?" Sarah fell silent. He was right, of course. A woman alone in this harsh land had few options, none of them good. "Who are they?" she asked instead, nodding toward the children. "Orphans? Their parents died in various ways. Disease, accidents, raids. I took them in." This surprised her. She studied his profile, trying to reconcile the cold man who just purchased her like cattle with someone who'd take in orphan children. "That's kind of you," he snorted. "Kindness has nothing to do with it. They needed a place. I had room. They work for their keep." But Sarah caught the youngest boy. He couldn't be more than 6, clutching a well-worn wooden toy horse, the kind of toy that someone had carved with care. The kind that cold, practical men didn't usually bother with. The ride to the Double R Ranch took 2 hours through increasingly desolate landscape. Sarah watched the terrain change from the ramshackle buildings of town to open prairie, then to the vast grasslands that supported Ethan's massive herds. Even in drought, his land looked better maintained than most, with strategic water sources and sections of healthier grass. The ranch house, when it finally came into view, took her breath away. It was massive, 2 stories of solid timber and stone, with a wraparound porch and real glass windows. Barns and outbuildings spread out behind it, and she could see cowboys moving about their duties in the distance. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It's practical," Ethan corrected. "Built to last, not to impress." But Sarah noticed the carefully tended roses climbing up one corner of the porch, the kind of touch that suggested a woman's hand. His late wife's, perhaps. As the wagon pulled up to the house, the children scrambled out. The oldest, a boy of about 12 with sandy hair and serious eyes, helped the younger ones down. "Tom," Ethan called, "show Miss Bennett to the blue room. She'll be staying with us for a while." Tom nodded, eyeing Sarah warily. "Yes, sir." "The rest of you, get washed up for supper, and actually use soap this time. Annie." The little girl, Annie, apparently giggled, despite trying to look serious. She had blonde curls and couldn't be more than 7. Sarah climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from the ride. She followed Tom into the house, marveling at the interior. It was well furnished but had an emptiness to it, as if the life had been drained out along with whoever had decorated it originally. "This way, ma'am," Tom said, leading her up a wide staircase. "Mr. Rollins don't usually bring folks home." "I imagine not," Sarah murmured. "You gonna be our new ma?" the boy asked suddenly, then flushed red. Sorry, I shouldn't—" "It's all right," Sarah said gently. "And no, I don't think so. I'm not sure what I am yet." Tom nodded knowingly. "That's how we all felt when we first got here. Mr. Rollins. He's not much for talking, but he's good, fair, he don't hit or nothing, and there's always food." The fact that "he don't hit" was considered a positive attribute spoke volumes about what these children had endured before coming here. The blue room turned out to be a modest but comfortable space with a real bed, a washstand, and a small wardrobe. It was more luxury than Sarah had seen in months. "Supper's at 6, Tom informed her. "Mr. Rollins don't like tardiness." After he left, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself a moment to process what had happened. This morning, she'd woken up in a jail cell, knowing she was to be sold. Now she was in a fine house, with no clear understanding of what was expected of her. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She opened the door to find a Mexican woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and work-worn hands. "I'm Rosa," the woman said. "I cook and help with the house. Mr. Rollins asked me to bring you these." She handed Sarah a bundle of clothes, simple but clean dresses, undergarments, and a pair of sturdy boots. "Thank you," Sarah said, genuinely grateful. "Rosa, can I ask, what does Mr. Rollins expect from me?" Rosa studied her for a moment. "I've worked for Signor Rollins for 10 years, since before his wife died. He is a hard man, but not cruel. Today, what he did. This is not usual. I think maybe he saw something that reminded him of better times, or maybe he just couldn't stand to see what was happening. And the children. Los niños. He says he takes them for practical reasons. But you watch. He carved toys for the little ones. Teaches the older ones to read and write. A practical man doesn't do such things." After Rosa left, Sarah washed and changed, the clean clothes feeling like armor against an uncertain future. When she made her way downstairs at 6, she found the dining room already occupied. Ethan sat at the head of the table, the 4 children arranged on either side. "Miss Bennett," he acknowledged. "Take a seat." She sat at the foot of the table, the position clearly meant for a woman of the house. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Children, introduce yourselves properly," Ethan instructed. "I'm Tom, ma'am. I'm 12. The sandy-haired boy spoke first. "Annie, I'm 7 3/4. The blonde girl beamed at her. "James, 10. A dark-haired boy with suspicious eyes muttered. "Mary, the last child, a girl of about 9 with brown braids, whispered so softly Sarah barely heard her. "It's nice to meet you all," Sarah said warmly. "And please, call me Sarah." Dinner was a quiet affair. Beef stew, fresh bread, and preserved peaches. The food was plentiful and well prepared. Another surprise in a bachelor household. Sarah noticed how Ethan quietly made sure each child had enough, refilling Mary's plate when she emptied it and reminding James to eat his vegetables. After dinner, the children scattered to their evening chores. Sarah began clearing the table out of habit, but Ethan stopped her. "That's Rosa's job." "I need to earn my keep somehow." Sarah said, "You paid a lot of money for me." His eyes flashed. "I paid money for your freedom, not for you. You're not a possession, Miss Bennett." "Then what am I?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the darkening sky. "I don't know yet. For now, you're a guest. We'll figure out the rest as we go. And if I wanted to leave, then I'd give you a horse, supplies, and money for wherever you wanted to go. But I'd ask you to think carefully. The world isn't kind to women alone. Sarah studied him. This contradictory man who bought her freedom but insisted she wasn't bought, who took in orphans but claimed it was purely practical, who had hard eyes but gentle hands when he thought no one was looking. "I'll stay," she said finally. "For now." He nodded, seeming neither pleased nor displeased. "Breakfast is at dawn. We work hard here. Everyone contributes. Rosa will show you what needs doing." As he turned to leave, Sarah called out, "Mr. Rollins, thank you. Whatever your reasons, thank you." He paused in the doorway, his back to her. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Bennett. This life isn't easy, and I'm not an easy man to live with. You may yet regret coming here." Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the sound of children's voices drifting in from outside. She walked to the window, watching as Annie chased fireflies while Tom tried to look too grown up to join in. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new uncertainties. But tonight, for the first time in months, she had a full belly, clean clothes, and a safe place to sleep. In the harsh reality of frontier life, that was no small thing. As the stars began to appear in the vast Texas sky, Sarah allowed herself a small moment of hope. She wasn't free, not really, but she wasn't in chains either. And in this strange household with its damaged man and orphaned children, perhaps she could find something she'd thought lost forever. A purpose, a place, maybe even a home. The sound of Ethan's boots on the porch below drew her attention. He stood there in the gathering darkness, a solitary figure gazing out at his land. There was a loneliness to him that matched her own, a grief that shaped his shoulders and shadowed his eyes. Sarah understood then why he'd bought her freedom, not out of kindness or need, but out of recognition. He'd seen himself on that platform, someone reduced to their lowest point, surrounded by those who saw only an opportunity to profit from misery. Tomorrow, she would begin the hard work of earning her place here, but tonight, she simply stood at the window, watching the stars emerge one by one, grateful for this unexpected chance at redemption. In the distance, a coyote howled, and the vast Texas night stretched endlessly before them all. The first week at the Double R Ranch passed in a blur of adjustments and small disasters. Sarah woke each morning to the sound of roosters and the distant lowing of cattle, a far cry from the cramped jail cell where she'd spent her final nights before the auction. The vast ranch house, with its polished floors and high ceilings, still felt like a maze she was afraid to fully explore. Rosa had shown her the daily routines, but Sarah's hands, more accustomed to mending and light farm work, struggled with the demands of managing such a large household. The cast-iron stove seemed to have a mind of its own, burning everything she attempted to cook. The washing required strength she didn't yet possess, and even simple tasks like making beds to Ethan's exacting standards proved challenging. "Mija," Rosa said gently one morning, finding Sarah near tears over a pot of scorched porridge. "You try too hard. The house, she knows when you're afraid of her." "I'm not afraid of a house," Sarah protested, though her trembling hands betrayed her. "No, then why do you walk like you're going to break something? This is supposed to be your home now. No." Home. The word felt foreign in Sarah's mouth. She'd had a home once, before drought and death took it away. This place, beautiful as it was, felt more like a test she was failing. The children watched her with varying degrees of wariness. Tom maintained polite distance, helping when asked but offering nothing more. James actively avoided her, disappearing whenever she entered a room. Little Annie followed her around like a shadow, full of questions Sarah didn't always know how to answer. And Mary, quiet, watchful Mary, seemed to be waiting for something, though Sarah couldn't fathom what. Ethan himself was like a ghost in his own home. He left before dawn to work with the cattle and returned after dark, taking his meals in silence. He spoke to her only when necessary, his gray eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. The only signs she had that he noticed her presence at all were the small considerations, a new apron appearing on her bed after she'd singed her old dress, a jar of salve left wordlessly on the kitchen table after he'd seen her burned fingers. It was on her 8th day at the ranch that everything began to shift. The morning started poorly. Sarah had risen early, determined to prepare breakfast before Rosa arrived. She'd managed the coffee without incident, but her attempt at biscuits had yielded flat. Hard discs that even the ranch dogs would likely refuse. The bacon burned while she was tending to the eggs, filling the kitchen with acrid smoke. What in the blazes? Ethan appeared in the doorway, dressed for the day's work, his expression dark as the smoke. "I'm sorry," Sarah stammered, frantically waving a dish towel to clear the air. "I was trying to burn my house down." His voice was sharp with more than just anger about the smoke. Sarah's own temper, held in check by gratitude and uncertainty, finally sparked. "To earn my keep, to prove I'm not just some useless burden you're stuck with." "I never said you were." "You don't have to say it." The words poured out, weeks of fear and frustration finally finding voice. "I see it every time you look at me, if you look at me at all. You bought me like cattle, and now you don't know what to do with me. So you ignore me and hope I'll just disappear." Ethan stepped fully into the kitchen, his presence filling the space. "Is that what you think?" "What else am I supposed to think? You saved me from that platform." "Yes, and I'm grateful. But for what? To be a ghost in your house, to fail at every task while your children watch and wait for you to send me away." "My children," he started, then stopped. Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, at hearing them called his. The moment was broken by a crash from upstairs, followed by Annie's terrified scream. Both adults forgot their argument. Racing for the stairs, they found Annie in her room, Mary unconscious on the floor, her face flushed with fever and her breathing labored. "She was trying to get up," Annie sobbed. "She said she didn't feel good, and then she just fell." Ethan gathered Mary in his arms, his face grim. "Tom," he bellowed, "ride to town for Doc Morrison. Tell him to come quick." "The doctor's gone to Austin." Rosa appeared in the doorway, breathless from running. "Won't be back for 3 days." Sarah watched the color drain from Ethan's face. She'd seen that look before, the helpless terror of watching someone you love slip away. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "Let me see her," she said quietly. "You're not a doctor," Ethan said, though his arms tightened around the child. "No, but I nursed my mother through fever before she died. I know some things." When he hesitated, she added, "What choice do we have?" Slowly, reluctantly, he laid Mary on her bed. Sarah placed a hand on the child's burning forehead, then gently examined her throat and listened to her breathing. "It's fever, but I don't think it's the serious kind," she said. "Rosa, I need willow bark tea, cool water, and clean cloths. Tom, open all the windows. We need fresh air. James, go to the spring house and bring back all the ice you can carry." "Ice won't last in this heat," James protested. "It doesn't need to last, just long enough to bring her temperature down. Go!" To her surprise, everyone obeyed without question, even Ethan. Sarah turned to Annie, who was crying quietly in the corner. "Sweetheart, I need you to be very brave. Can you sit with Mary and sing to her? She likes your singing, doesn't she?" Annie nodded, scrubbing at her tears. "She says it sounds like angels." "Then that's what she needs to hear right now." For the next 6 hours, Sarah barely left Mary's side. She bathed the child with cool water, coaxed willow bark tea between her lips, and monitored every change in her breathing. Ethan stationed himself in a chair by the door, ostensibly reading a ledger but never turning a page. The other children drifted in and out, bringing fresh water and ice without being asked. Rosa kept everyone fed, though no one had much appetite, and through it all, Annie's sweet voice sang every song she knew, from hymns to silly ditties about frogs. As the sun began to set, Mary's fever broke. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing first on Sarah's face. "Are you an angel?" she whispered. Sarah smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "No, sweetheart, just Sarah." "Sarah," Mary repeated, as if tasting the name. Then, so quietly, Sarah almost missed it. "Mama used to take care of me like this." The room went very still. Sarah glanced at Ethan, saw something raw and vulnerable flash across his features before he stood abruptly and left. The other children exchanged looks Sarah couldn't interpret. "You rest now," Sarah murmured, smoothing Mary's damp hair. "Annie's here, and I'll be right outside if you need me." She found Ethan on the porch, hands braced on the railing, staring out at the darkening land, without the Stetson shadowing his face. He looked younger, more vulnerable. "Thank you," he said without turning. The words sounded like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep. "You don't need to thank me. She's a child. Anyone would have—" "No." He turned then, and the intensity in his eyes stopped her words. "Not anyone. Not here. This land. It makes people hard, makes them look after their own, and devil take the rest." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "Mary hasn't spoken about her mother since she came here 2 years ago. Neither have the others." Sarah moved to stand beside him, careful to leave space between them. "They miss having a woman's care." "They miss more than that." His voice was rough. "They miss having someone who sees them as children, not just small adults who need to earn their keep." A bitter smile touched his lips. "Seems I'm better with cattle than children." "That's not true. They adore you." "They respect me. They obey me. It's not the same thing." Sarah thought of Tom's careful distance, James's suspicion, Mary's watchful waiting. Then she thought of the carved toys, the patient lessons, the way Ethan's eyes softened when he thought no one was looking. "Maybe," she said carefully, "they're just afraid to want more, like someone else I could mention." He glanced at her sharply, "Meaning?" "You saved me from that platform, brought me here, but you keep me at arm's length. You're kind but distant. You provide but don't engage. What am I supposed to be here? Ethan." It was the first time she'd used his given name. Something shifted in the air between them. "I don't know," he admitted. "When I saw you there, proud even in chains, I thought—" He stopped, shook his head. "It doesn't matter what I thought. It matters to me." He was quiet for so long, Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, my wife, Elizabeth, she stood the same way when I first met her. Chin up, eyes blazing, refusing to be cowed by anything or anyone. Her father was trying to marry her off to some banker's son. She told him she'd rather eat dirt." Sarah smiled despite herself. "What did you do?" "Offered to teach her to ride instead." Her father was furious. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "We were married 3 months later." "You must miss her terribly." "Every day." The smile faded. "She died protecting Mary. Raiders came while I was moving cattle to the far pasture. Elizabeth hid the children in the root cellar, faced those men alone with my rifle." His hands clenched on the railing. "They found her body by the door. She'd taken 3 of them with her." Sarah's heart ached for him, for all of them. "She was brave. She was everything." The words came out cracked. "This house, these children, the life we built, it all had meaning with her in it. Without her—" He gestured helplessly. "I'm just going through the motions, keeping things running, keeping everyone fed and sheltered. But I don't know how to give them what she did." "What was that?" He turned to look at her fully. "Hope, joy, the feeling that tomorrow could be better than today. I'm too broken for that now." Sarah studied him in the fading light, this strong, wounded man who saved orphans and lost women but couldn't save himself. "Maybe that's why you brought me here, not to replace her. No one could, but maybe to remind you that broken doesn't mean worthless." He stared at her, something flickering in those storm-gray eyes. "You think you're broken?" "Aren't I sold for debts? No family, no prospects. Just another piece of frontier wreckage." "No." The word was firm, almost angry. "You're not wreckage. Today proved that. The way you took charge, the way you cared for Mary. You're exactly what—" He stopped himself. "What?" Sarah pressed. "What this house needs," he finished quietly. "What they need." The air between them crackled with unspoken possibilities. Sarah found herself acutely aware of his nearness, the warmth radiating from his body in the cooling evening air. She wondered what it would be like to step closer, to offer comfort more tangible than words. "Mr. Rollins!" Tom's voice from the doorway shattered the moment. "Mary's asking for Miss Sarah, and for you." They found Mary propped up in bed, looking pale but alert. The other children had gathered around her, Annie still holding her hand. "I'm hungry," Mary announced, which drew relieved laughter from everyone. "Rosa's making soup," Tom told her. "The kind you like, with the little stars." As the children chattered, Sarah noticed Ethan hanging back in the doorway. She caught his eye, nodded toward Mary. He hesitated, then moved to sit on the edge of the bed. "You scared us, little one," he said gruffly. Mary studied him with those two wise eyes. "I'm sorry." "Nothing to be sorry for. Being sick isn't a choice." "Sarah took care of me," Mary said. "Like—" She glanced at Sarah, then back at Ethan. "Like a mama would." The room went quiet. Ethan's jaw worked, but no words came. It was James who broke the silence. "She's not our mama," he said flatly. "She's just another person who'll leave when something better comes along." "James," Tom warned. "What?" "It's true. Everyone leaves. Our real parents. The family that was supposed to take us before Mr. Rollins did. Why should she be different?" Sarah's heart broke for the boy's pain. She moved to kneel beside him, not touching but close enough that he had to look at her. "You're right," she said simply. "People do leave, sometimes by choice, sometimes not. And I can't promise I'll be here forever. No one can promise that. But I can promise that as long as I am here, I'll take care of you. All of you. Not because I have to, but because I want to." James's eyes filled with tears he refused to shed. "That's what they all say." "Then I'll have to prove it. Won't I, day by day, the same way Mr. Rollins has proved it to you?" She stood, finding Ethan's eyes on her with an expression she couldn't read. "I should help Rosa with supper." As she left, she heard Annie's voice. "I think she means it. Mr. Rollins, don't you—" She didn't hear his answer, but later, when she brought Mary's soup, she found all of them still there, Ethan reading aloud from a book of fairy tales while the children listened. It was such a domestic scene, so full of quiet tenderness, that Sarah had to pause in the doorway to compose herself. Ethan looked up, caught her watching. For a moment, their eyes held. Then Annie noticed her and exclaimed, "Miss Sarah, come listen. It's about a princess who saves herself." "In a minute, sweetheart. Mary needs to eat first." As she helped Mary with the soup, Sarah felt the shift in the room's dynamics. She was no longer an interloper, no longer just the woman Ethan had impulsively saved. She'd proven herself in the only way that mattered here, through action, through care, through showing up when needed. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Sarah found a steaming cup of tea waiting on the kitchen table. Beside it was a note in Ethan's strong handwriting. "Thank you, for Mary, for all of them. She smiled, cradling the warm cup. It was a small gesture, but in this house of careful distances and guarded hearts, it felt like a beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to fail or succeed. But tonight, she'd earned her place here through something more valuable than cooking or cleaning. She'd shown them that she could love. Through the window. She could see Ethan making his final rounds, checking the barns and outbuildings. A solitary figure still, but perhaps not as alone as he'd been that morning. Sarah watched until he disappeared into the darkness, then finished her tea and headed to bed. As she passed Mary's room, she heard the child's voice, drowsy but content. "Papa, can Sarah stay forever?" She didn't hear Ethan's response, but she heard the hope in his silence. It matched the hope blooming quietly in her own chest, fragile still, but growing stronger with each passing day. The weeks following Mary's illness brought a tentative rhythm to life at the Double R Ranch. Sarah found her place in the daily routines, her hands growing capable with practice, her confidence building with each small success. The children, too, began to accept her presence as something more permanent than they'd initially believed. It was a Thursday morning when the past came calling. Sarah was in the kitchen garden with Annie, teaching her to identify herbs, when Rosa appeared with an uneasy expression. "Mija, there are visitors. Ladies from town, they ask for you." Sarah's stomach dropped. In her weeks at the ranch, she'd managed to avoid town entirely, sending Tom or Rosa for necessary supplies. She knew this day would come, the day when proper society would remind her of her place. "I'll be right there," she said, smoothing her apron and checking her hair. Annie grabbed her hand. "I'll come with you." "No, sweetheart, stay with Rosa." Sarah managed a smile. "Practice what I taught you about the rosemary and thyme." The visitors waited in the front parlor, a room Sarah had only cleaned, never occupied. 3 women sat precisely on the horsehair sofa, their backs rigid, their faces carefully composed. Sarah recognized them. Mrs. Abigail Morrison, the auctioneer's wife. Mrs. Prudence Walsh, whose husband owned the largest store in town, and Mrs. Catherine Jeffries, the banker's wife. But it was the 4th woman who made Sarah's blood run cold. Victoria Thornton sat in Ethan's leather chair like a queen holding court. Ethan's former sister-in-law, now married to the wealthiest merchant in 3 counties. She was everything Sarah wasn't. Elegant, refined, with smooth hands that had never known hard labor and clothes worth more than most families saw in a year. "Miss Bennett," Victoria's voice was honey over ice. "How interesting to finally meet you." "Mrs. Thornton." Sarah nodded, remaining standing. She wouldn't sit unless invited, maintaining the pretense of being staff rather than whatever she actually was. "We've come on a matter of Christian charity." "Mrs." Morrison began, her chins wobbling with righteous indignation. "To offer you a proper position." "I have a position," Sarah said carefully. "As what?" Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "My dear girl, everyone knows why Ethan bought you. And while we can't blame a man for having needs, it's simply not proper to have you here with children." Heat flooded Sarah's face. "Mr. Rollins has never—" "Of course he hasn't." "Mrs." Walsh interrupted. "Not yet, but men are weak creatures, and you're what you are. A woman whose virtue was sold on a platform." "My virtue was never for sale," Sarah said quietly, her hands clenching in her skirts. "Only my freedom." "Is there a difference?" Mrs. Jeffries asked with false sympathy. "Dear, we're trying to help. Mrs. Thornton has graciously offered to employ you in her household as a scullery maid. Of course, but honest work for honest wages." Sarah looked at Victoria, saw the satisfied malice in her eyes. "Why would you do that?" "Because those children deserve better than a fallen woman playing house with their guardian," Victoria said, dropping all pretense of kindness. "Elizabeth was my sister. Those children should have come to me when she died, not stayed with the man who got her killed." "Ethan didn't he?" "He left her alone, went off to play cattle baron while raiders circled like wolves. And now he compounds his negligence by installing his—" She paused delicately. "Purchase in Elizabeth's home." The cruelty of it stole Sarah's breath. But before she could respond, a small voice piped up from the doorway. "She's not a purchase. She's Sarah." Annie stood there, Rosa hovering anxiously behind her. The little girl marched into the room with all the dignity her 7 years could muster. "Annie," Sarah started, but the child wasn't finished. "She takes care of us. She makes Tom laugh and helps James with his reading even though he pretends he doesn't need it. She saved Mary when she was sick, and she makes Mr. Rollins smile sometimes, which nobody else does." Annie planted herself in front of Sarah. "So you can't have her for your kitchen. We need her here." "Mrs." Morrison gasped at the child's impertinence. Victoria's face darkened. Little girls should be seen and not heard. Clearly, the lack of proper feminine guidance shows. "I'd rather have Sarah than a mean lady who says cruel things." Annie shot back. "Annie, that's enough," Sarah said gently, though her heart swelled. "Go back to Rosa." "But—" "Go on, sweetheart. I'll be fine." Annie reluctantly retreated, but not before shooting the visitors a look that would have done a gunslinger proud. "You see," Victoria stood, gathering her expensive shawl. "Already the children are becoming wild. Mark my words. Miss Bennett, Ethan's misguided charity won't last. When he tires of you, you'll have nothing. Take my offer now, while you still can." "I'll take my chances," Sarah said. "Then you're a fool." Victoria swept toward the door, pausing to deliver one last blow. "Ask him about the blue room you're sleeping in. Ask him whose room it was and why he put you there. See how long his kindness lasts when you know the truth." The women departed in a rustle of silk and disapproval, leaving Sarah shaking in the parlor. She sank into a chair, trying to process what had just happened. The blue room, Elizabeth's room, but surely not. It was too simple, too impersonal. "Sarah." Tom appeared in the doorway, his young face concerned. "We saw the ladies leave. Annie's crying. She thinks she made things worse." Sarah forced herself to stand, to push down her own turmoil. "Where is she?" "In the barn with the kittens." Sarah found Annie curled in the hay, surrounded by the barn cat's latest litter. Tears streaked the child's face. "Did I ruin everything?" Annie asked in a small voice. "Oh, sweetheart, no." Sarah gathered her close, heedless of the hay on her skirt. "You were very brave, maybe a little too brave, but I'm grateful. They were saying mean things about you and about Mr. Rollins." Annie sniffled. "Mrs. Thornton always says mean things. She wanted to take us after Mama Lizzie died, but Mr. Rollins wouldn't let her." Mama Lizzie. That's what we called her, to know the difference from our first mamas. Annie played with a kitten's paw. "She was nice. She smelled like flowers and taught me my letters. But she's in heaven now." Sarah held the child tighter, understanding dawning. These children had lost not one but 2 mothers. No wonder they kept their distance. No wonder they were afraid to hope. "I miss having a mama," Annie whispered. Sarah's eyes burned. "I know, sweetheart. I miss having one too." They sat quietly for a while, drawing comfort from each other and the purring kittens. Finally, Annie asked, "Are you going to leave because of those mean ladies?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." "Promise." Sarah thought of Victoria's threats, of the blue room's secrets, of all the ways this could go wrong. But looking down at Annie's trusting face, she could give only one answer. "I promise." The rest of the day passed in a blur of normalcy that felt forced. The children were subdued, clearly aware that something had happened. Even James helped with chores without complaint, shooting Sarah worried glances when he thought she wasn't looking. Ethan didn't return for dinner. Rosa mentioned he was dealing with a problem in the far pasture, a fence down and cattle straying. Sarah tried not to feel abandoned, but Victoria's words echoed, "When he tires of you, you'll have nothing." After the children were in bed, Sarah found herself standing in the blue room, seeing it with new eyes. Were those Elizabeth's brushes on the dresser? Had she chosen the simple curtains, the wedding ring quilt on the bed? Why would Ethan put her here, in his dead wife's room, unable to bear the questions? She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the porch. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the vast sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. "Can't sleep." Sarah jumped. Ethan stood at the bottom of the porch steps, hat in hand, covered in dust and weariness. "I thought you were staying at the line shack tonight," she said. "Changed my mind." He climbed the steps slowly, like a man carrying weight beyond the physical. "Rosa told me about the visitors. News travels fast." "Everything travels fast here." He leaned against the porch rail, not looking at her. What did Victoria want? To offer me a position as her scullery maid. Sarah tried for lightness. "Apparently. I'm corrupting the children with my fallen woman ways." His jaw tightened. "You're not—" "Aren't I a woman bought off a platform, living in a house with an unmarried man?" Sarah pulled the shawl tighter. "She's not wrong about how it looks." "Since when do I give a damn how things look?" The vehemence in his voice startled her. She studied his profile in the moonlight, saw the anger there, but also something else. Fear. "She said other things," Sarah ventured. "About the room I'm in, about Elizabeth." Ethan went very still. "What about her?" Was it her room? A long silence. Then, "No, it was meant to be." He pushed off from the rail, pacing to the other end of the porch. "We built this house planning for the future. Separate bedrooms were her idea, said it was more proper, more civilized than the one-room cabin we started in. The blue room was for when she needed space, when the children were sick, when—" He stopped. "She died before ever sleeping there. Too busy living to worry about propriety, I guess." Sarah absorbed this, understanding more than he probably meant to reveal. "Why put me there?" "Because it was empty." He turned to face her. "Because it was waiting for someone. Because maybe I'm tired of this whole damn house being a monument to what I lost instead of what I might still have." The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Sarah found herself moving closer, drawn by something stronger than caution. "Ethan—" "Don't!" His voice was rough. "Don't say whatever kind thing you're about to say. I know what I am. Sarah, a broken man raising broken children in a broken home. Victoria's right about one thing. You deserve better than this." "What if I don't want better?" The words came out before she could stop them. "What if I want this?" He stared at her, something raw and hungry flashing in his eyes before he shuddered it away. "You don't know what you're saying." "Don't I?" Sarah stepped closer still, close enough to see the pulse jumping in his throat. "I've spent weeks in this house, with these children, with you. I've seen how you carve toys when you thought no one was watching, how you check on them every night, adjusting blankets and whispering prayers, how you stand at Elizabeth's grave every Sunday but never let the children see you cry." "Sarah, I've seen you. Ethan Rollins, the real you, not the cold cattleman or the grieving widower, and I'm still here." He caught her arms, whether to push her away or pull her closer. She couldn't tell. "This isn't what I intended when I bought your freedom." "I know." She reached up, daringly, to touch his face. His skin was rough with stubble, warm despite the cool night. Maybe that's what makes it real. For a moment, she thought he would kiss her. His hands tightened on her arms, his head lowered. She could feel his breath on her face, see the struggle in his eyes. Then a child's cry split the night. "Annie, caught in another nightmare?" They broke apart. Sarah's hands trembled as she smoothed her skirt. "I should—" "Go," he said quietly. "She needs you." Sarah found Annie tangled in her sheets, whimpering about ladies taking her away. She gathered the child close, singing softly until the nightmare faded. When Annie finally settled, Sarah found Mary and James standing in the doorway. "We heard her crying," James said defensively, as if caring was something to be ashamed of. "Come on," Sarah said, making room on the bed. "There's space for everyone." They piled in, even Tom appearing after a moment's hesitation. Sarah found herself in the middle of a tangle of children, all seeking comfort from storms both real and imagined. "Tell us a story," Mary requested softly. So Sarah did, spinning a tale about a brave family on the frontier, facing dangers together, protecting each other against all odds. As she spoke, she became aware of a presence in the doorway. Ethan stood there, a shadow against shadow, listening. When the children finally slept, Sarah carefully extracted herself. Ethan had moved to the hallway window, staring out at his land. "They love you," he said without turning. "They're easy to love." "No, they're not. They're prickly and wounded and afraid, but you love them anyway." He faced her then. "I won't let Victoria take you from them. From us." "Is that what I am part of the UAE?" He moved toward her, each step deliberate. "You became part of us the night you saved Mary. Maybe before that. Maybe from the moment you stood on that platform with your chin up, refusing to be broken." "Ethan, but I need you to understand something." He was close now, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "If you stay, really stay, it can't be as hired help. This county, these people, they'll tear you apart if you're not under the protection of my name." Sarah's heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Victoria was right about one thing. The way things are now isn't sustainable. Either you leave, find somewhere they can't reach you with their poison, or... He cupped her face in his calloused hands. "Or you marry me, make it real. Give them no room to whisper." Sarah couldn't breathe. "That's not... You can't propose to protect my reputation." "Can I?" His thumb traced her cheekbone. "People marry for worse reasons." "At least we'd be doing it for them." He nodded toward Annie's room. "And maybe for us too." "You don't love me," Sarah whispered. "No," he agreed, and her heart cracked. "But I could... God help me, I think I already do a little. And that terrifies me more than all of Victoria's threats." Sarah closed her eyes, overwhelmed. When she opened them, he was still there, waiting. This broken, beautiful man who'd saved her only to be saved in return. "Ask me again," she said. "In the morning, when the children are awake, when the sun is shining and we're not both running on fear and moonlight. Ask me then." He nodded, releasing her slowly. "In the morning, then..." As Sarah returned to her room, Elizabeth's room that never was, she wondered at the turns life could take. She'd stood on an auction block just weeks ago, certain her life was over. Now she stood on the precipice of something new, something that could be wonderful or terrible or both. Through her window, she could see Ethan in the yard below, checking the horses one last time. A solitary figure still, but perhaps not for much longer. In the morning, he would ask, and she would say yes. Not for reputation or protection, but for the possibility of building something real from the ashes of their separate griefs. For the children who needed them both. For the love that might grow if given chance and time. For the hope that tomorrow could indeed be better than today. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, painting golden squares on the worn wooden floor. Sarah kneaded bread dough with practiced movements, finding comfort in the rhythm. 3 weeks had passed since Ethan's moonlit proposal. 3 weeks since she'd asked him to wait for daylight. He hadn't asked again. Instead, they'd fallen into a careful dance of almost touches and unfinished conversations. He still left coffee for her each morning. She still mended his shirts with tiny, perfect stitches. They spoke of cattle and weather and the children's lessons, but never of the words that hung between them like morning mist. "Miss Sarah, you're squishing it too hard," Annie observed from her perch at the table, where she was supposedly practicing her letters but actually drawing pictures of horses. Am I? Sarah eased her grip on the dough. Thank you for telling me. Mama Lizzie used to make bread on Saturdays too, Annie said conversationally. But hers was lighter. Rosa says it's 'cause she had gentle hands. Sarah's hands stilled. The children rarely mentioned Elizabeth directly, though her presence haunted every corner of the house. I'm still learning, Sarah said carefully. Maybe my hands will get gentler with practice. Annie considered this. Maybe, or maybe you just have different kinds of hands. Yours are good for other things, like healing and hugging. Before Sarah could respond, the kitchen door burst open. Tom rushed in, face flushed with urgency. Miss Sarah, riders coming. Lots of them. Mr. Rollins wants you and the young ones in the house. Now. Sarah's blood chilled. In the weeks since her arrival, she'd learned that unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. Where is he? Front porch, with the hands. Says to bar the doors and keep away from windows. Sarah quickly ushered Annie upstairs, calling for the other children. They gathered in the hallway, away from any windows, Mary clutching her rag doll and James trying to look brave. What's happening? Mary whispered. I don't know yet, Sarah said honestly. But we're safe in here. Mr. Rollins won't let anything happen to us. Through the walls, they could hear voices, Ethan's low and controlled, others louder, aggressive. Sarah recognized one with a sick lurch of her stomach. Jed Hawkins, the drunk who'd accosted her in town before Ethan intervened. What was he doing here? No, she's here. Rollins? Jed's slurred voice carried. Saw her myself last week when I was passing by. That pretty little thing you bought off the platform. You're drunk. Hawkins, get off my land. Ethan's voice was deadly calm, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. Now, no need for hostility. Another voice interjected, smoother, more educated. We're here on legitimate business. The lady's debts weren't fully satisfied. You see, there's the matter of interest. I paid Morrison $300, more than enough to clear everything. But Morrison wasn't the primary creditor. I am. The smooth voice took on an edge. William Prescott, attorney at law. Miss Bennett's father owed my client considerable money. The auction was merely to recoup initial losses. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth. This couldn't be happening. The debts were paid. Ethan had made sure of it. How much? Ethan asked. With interest and legal fees, $500. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to return the merchandise. She's not merchandise. The dangerous edge in Ethan's voice made Sarah shiver. The law says otherwise. She was sold for debt. That makes her property until all debts are satisfied. Prescott's voice turned sly. Of course. There might be other arrangements. Hawkins here has expressed interest in taking her off your hands. Clear the debt entirely in exchange for, shall we say, a year of her service. The hell you will. The sound of a rifle being cocked made the children flinch. Sarah pulled them closer. Now, Mr. Rollins, Prescott said nervously. There's no need for weapons. We're civilized men here. Are we because civilized men don't trade women like cattle? You did, Hawkins laughed nastily. Bought her right off that platform. What makes you different from us? A long silence. Then Ethan's voice, colder than Sarah had ever heard it. The difference is I'll kill anyone who tries to take her. You've got 10 seconds to get off my land. Oh, you can't threaten officers of the law? Prescott blustered. 9 seconds. This isn't over, Rollins. But Sarah could hear horses moving, the group retreating. The law is on our side. 5 seconds. The thunder of hooves faded into distance. Sarah waited, counting heartbeats, until the front door opened and Ethan's voice called, It's safe. They found him on the porch, rifle still in hand. His foreman Miguel beside him. Other ranch hands were visible at strategic points around the property. They'll be back, Miguel said quietly. Men like that don't give up easy. I know. Ethan's eyes found Sarah's. Take the children to the kitchen. I need to speak with Miss Bennett. The children protested, but Sarah firmly directed them to Rosa's care when they were alone. Ethan set the rifle aside and gripped the porch railing. Is it true? Sarah asked. About the debts. Prescott's a snake, but he knows the law. If he has papers showing your father owed money. Ethan shook his head. He'll be back with the sheriff next time. Sarah sank onto the porch bench, legs suddenly weak. I thought it was over. I thought I was free. You are free. No, I'm not. I'm just between owners. The bitter words tasted like ashes. Maybe I should go with them. End this before. Ethan spun, crossing to her in 2 strides. He knelt before her, gripping her hands. Don't even think it. What choice do I have? I won't have you and the children caught up in my troubles. Our troubles, he corrected fiercely. You're part of this family now. Am I? Sarah pulled her hands free. You were going to ask me something 3 weeks ago. In the daylight, you said, but the sun's come up 21 times since then, and you've said nothing. He rocked back on his heels, pain flashing across his features. Sarah, were they just pretty words? Ethan, something you said in the moment but didn't mean. No. He stood abruptly, pacing away. They were real, too real. That's why I couldn't. Every morning I'd wake up intending to ask, and every morning I'd see you with the children, laughing, bringing light back to this house. And I'd think, what right do I have to trap you here? Trap me. He gestured broadly at the land around them. This place killed Elizabeth. The isolation, the danger, the endless work. You deserve better than spending your life fighting drought and loneliness and men like Hawkins. Sarah stood, anger sparking. You think I'm weak? I think you're precious. The words burst out of him. I think you're the best thing that's happened to us since, and I think I'm selfish enough to want to keep you, even knowing what this life costs. They stared at each other across the space of a few feet that felt like miles. You stupid, noble fool, Sarah said finally. I'm not Elizabeth. I'm not some delicate flower who needs protecting from hard truths. I've been sold, imprisoned, mocked, and threatened. I have survived it all. What makes you think a little drought and isolation would break me? Sarah. And another thing. She stepped closer, poking him in the chest. You don't get to decide what I deserve. I decide that. And what I've decided is that I want this, the children, the ranch, the whole difficult, beautiful mess of it. The only question is whether you want it too. He caught her hand against his chest, holding it there. You know I do. Then ask me, right now, in the daylight, like you promised. For a moment, she thought he'd retreat again. Then something shifted in his expression, determination replacing doubt. Sarah Bennett, he said formally. Will you marry me, not for protection or propriety, but because I can't imagine facing another day without knowing you'll be there at the end of it? Because the children love you. And more importantly, because He stopped, swallowed hard. Because somewhere between that auction platform and this moment, I started loving you too. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Yes. Yes. Yes, you impossible man. Yes to all of it. He pulled her against him, holding her like she might disappear. Sarah buried her face in his shirt, breathing in the scent of leather and soap and home. We'll need to do it quick, he said against her hair, before Prescott comes back with the legal papers. How quick? Tomorrow, if we can manage it. Judge Patterson owes me a favor. He'll perform the ceremony without the usual waiting period. Sarah pulled back to look at him. Tomorrow. But what will people say? A rare smile tugged at his lips. Let them talk. They will anyway. Miss Sarah, Mr. Rollins. Annie's voice carried from the kitchen window. Rosa says to come eat before the food gets cold. We should tell them, Sarah said. Together. Everything together from now on. They found the children already seated at the table, trying to pretend they hadn't been pressed against the windows watching. Rosa bustled about, her face carefully neutral, but Sarah caught the pleased glint in her eye. Children, Ethan began, then stopped, looking to Sarah for help. We have something to tell you, Sarah said. Mr. Rollins and I are getting married. The silence was deafening. Then Annie shrieked with joy, launching herself at Sarah. Really, you'll really be our mama. If you'll have me, Sarah managed through Annie's strangling hug. Tom stood, very formally offering his hand to Ethan. Congratulations, sir. She's a fine choice. Thank you, Tom. Ethan shook the boy's hand solemnly. Mary smiled shyly. Will you wear a pretty dress? The prettiest I can manage on short notice, Sarah promised. All eyes turned to James, who hadn't moved or spoken. His face was unreadable, closed off in a way that reminded Sarah painfully of Ethan. James, she ventured. Why now? He asked bluntly. Is it because of those men? Are you marrying her to keep her safe? Ethan started to speak, but Sarah touched his arm. This was hers to answer. Partly, she said honestly. The marriage will protect me legally, but that's not the only reason or even the main reason. She knelt beside James's chair. I'm marrying him because I love this family, because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want to know is if you're all okay. Because when something good happens, you're the ones I want to tell. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a house where I work and became home. James's lower lip trembled. People leave, even when they promise not to. You're right. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they can't help it. Sarah thought of Elizabeth, of all the mothers these children had lost. But I can promise you this, as long as I have breath in my body, I'll fight to stay with you. And if something takes me away, it won't be by choice. That's the best promise anyone can make. James was quiet for a long moment. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. Okay. Okay. Okay, you can marry him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But he better treat you right, or he'll answer to me. James, Tom looked scandalized. But Ethan nodded gravely. Fair enough. I'd expect nothing less. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of excited chatter. Wedding plans, even hasty ones, had a way of bringing out opinions in everyone. Annie wanted flowers everywhere. Mary shyly suggested Sarah wear her mother's pearl combs. Tom offered to polish Ethan's good boots. Even Rosa got caught up, planning a wedding cake with precious sugar she'd been hoarding. It wasn't until evening, when the children were in bed and the house had settled, that reality crept back in. Sarah found Ethan in his study, writing letters by lamplight. Arranging things, he explained at her questioning look. Judge Patterson, the Reverend, a few others. We'll need witnesses. Sarah perched on the edge of his desk. Are you sure about this? It's all happening so fast. He set down his pen, giving her his full attention. Are you having second thoughts? No, maybe, I don't know. She twisted her hands. What if Prescott is right? What if there really are more debts you could end up paying for my father's mistakes forever? Then I'll pay them. He stood, moving to stand before her. Whatever it costs, Sarah, you're worth it. You barely know me. I know enough. He counted on his fingers. I know you sing when you think no one's listening. I know you put extra sugar in James's coffee because he's trying so hard to be grown. I know you check on the children 3 times every night, adjusting blankets they've kicked off. I know you talk to the horses like they're people and sneak treats to the barn cats. Sarah felt tears threatening. Ethan, I know you're strong enough to survive being sold, but gentle enough to hold Annie through nightmares. I know you've brought laughter back to this house and hope back to my heart. He cupped her face gently. What else do I need to know?
That I love you too,
She whispered.
that I have for weeks now.
He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they parted, both were breathless. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow you'll be Sarah Rollins, and let anyone try to take you from us then. Tomorrow, she agreed. But as she made her way to her room, soon to be abandoned for the one Ethan had built for a wife, Sarah couldn't shake a thread of unease. Men like Prescott and Hawkins didn't give up easily. Marriage would offer legal protection. But would it be enough? Through her window, she could see riders on the distant ridge, barely visible in the moonlight. Watching. Waiting. Tomorrow she would marry Ethan Rollins. Tomorrow she would officially become mother to 4 wounded children and wife to a man still healing from loss. Tomorrow she would face whatever came next with a new name and the strength of family behind her. But tonight, she kept vigil at her window, watching those distant shadows, and prayed that tomorrow would come without bloodshed. The sound of footsteps in the hallway drew her attention. Ethan stood in her doorway, rifle in hand. "Saw them too?" he asked. "Yes. Miguel and the boys are keeping watch. Nothing will happen tonight." Sarah nodded, but didn't move from the window. Ethan crossed to stand beside her, solid and reassuring. "Whatever comes," he said quietly. "We face it together." "Together," she agreed, leaning into his warmth. They stood there as the night deepened, 2 souls preparing to bind their lives together while shadows circled in the darkness, waiting for their chance to strike. But that was tomorrow's battle. Tonight, they had each other, and the promise of a future worth fighting for. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, a mockery of the tension that thrummed through the Double R Ranch like a taut wire. Sarah stood before the mirror in Elizabeth's room, her room now, wearing a simple blue dress that Rosa had altered through the night. Mary's mother's pearl combs held her hair back, and Annie had woven wildflowers into a small bouquet.
You look beautiful,
Mary whispered from the doorway.
like a real bride.
Annie added, bouncing with excitement. Sarah's hands trembled as she smoothed the dress. In an hour, she would be Sarah Rollins. The thought should have brought pure joy, but the riders on the ridge hadn't left. If anything, their numbers had grown. Miss Sarah, Tom appeared, looking uncomfortably formal in his Sunday best. "Judge Patterson's here. Mr. Rollins says we're ready when you are." Sarah took a deep breath.
Then let's not keep them waiting.
The ceremony was held in the front parlor, with Judge Patterson presiding and the ranch hands serving as witnesses. Ethan stood by the fireplace in his black suit, looking more handsome than any man had a right to. When their eyes met, the worry she'd carried all morning eased slightly. "Dearly beloved," Judge Patterson began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "We are gathered here to witness the joining of Ethan Rollins and Sarah Bennett in holy matrimony." The words washed over Sarah like a dream. She was aware of the children standing close, of Rosa dabbing at her eyes, of Miguel keeping watch at the window. But mostly she was aware of Ethan, his steady presence, his calloused hands holding hers, his gray eyes soft with emotion. "Do you, Ethan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was firm, carrying to every corner of the room. "Do you, Sarah, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me by the state of Texas, I pronounce you husband and wife." Ethan's kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their audience. Annie cheered while James rolled his eyes, though Sarah caught him smiling. "Congratulations, Mrs. Rollins," Judge Patterson said warmly. "May I be the first to—" The front door burst open. Jed Hawkins stood there, flanked by 6 armed men, with Prescott lurking behind them like a vulture. "Sorry to interrupt the festivities," Hawkins drawled, his eyes roving over Sarah in a way that made her skin crawl. "But we've got business to conclude. Ethan stepped in front of Sarah, his hand moving to his hip where his gun should have been, but wasn't, not for his wedding.
"You're trespassing, Hawkins."
"Got a legal warrant says otherwise." Prescott stepped forward, waving a document. "Signed by Judge Mills over in Clearwater. Says we can collect on outstanding debts by any means necessary." "Judge Mills has no jurisdiction here," Judge Patterson said sharply. "He does when the debt originated in his county." Prescott's smile was oily. "Miss Bennett's father, Mrs. Rollins," Ethan corrected coldly. "Ah, yes, the hasty wedding. Very touching." Prescott consulted his papers. "Unfortunately, marriage doesn't absolve prior debts. In fact, it makes you liable for them, Mr. Rollins. So you can either pay the $500 now, or we take the lady as collateral until you can—" "The hell you will," Miguel said from the window, rifle visible. Now, Hawkins grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "No need for violence. We're reasonable men. In fact, I've got a proposition might solve everyone's problems." Sarah felt Ethan tense. "Speak your piece and get out." "Well, now, seems to me you've got something I want, and I've got the legal right to take it. But I'm willing to make a deal." Hawkins's eyes never left Sarah. "The little lady spends one night with me, just one night, and I'll convince Prescott here to tear up them papers." The room exploded. Ethan lunged forward, but Tom and Miguel held him back. Rosa cursed in Spanish while trying to cover Annie's ears. Judge Patterson thundered about indecency and law. But it was James who acted. The boy had slipped away during the commotion and returned with Ethan's gun belt. He pressed it into Ethan's hands with grim determination. "No one touches her," James said firmly. "She's our mother now." The simple declaration cut through the chaos. Ethan strapped on the gun belt with deliberate movements, his face carved from stone. "You've got 10 seconds to get off my land," he said quietly. Hawkins laughed. "You gonna shoot us all, Rollins? In front of your new family, what kind of example is that for the children?" "The kind that teaches them to protect what's theirs," Ethan replied. "Ethan, no!" Sarah grabbed his arm. "There has to be another way." "There is," a new voice said from the doorway. Victoria Thornton swept in, dressed in expensive black silk, looking for all the world like she owned the place. Behind her came Sheriff Coleman and 2 deputies. "Sheriff," Prescott said nervously, "we have a legal warrant, which I'll be examining closely." Sheriff Coleman said, "Mrs. Thornton here has made some interesting allegations about forged documents and fraudulent claims." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "It seems Mr. Prescott has been quite busy lately, filing false claims against various women of limited means. My husband's bank has records of all of Mr. Bennett's actual debts, all of which were satisfied months before his death." Prescott went pale. "That's impossible. I have documents." "Forgeries," Victoria said coolly. "Rather poor ones. According to my husband's bookkeeper, you really should have been more careful about the dates. Mr. Prescott, hard to collect on debts that were recorded after the debtor's death." "Are you lying witch?" Hawkins started forward, but found himself facing multiple gun barrels. "I'd choose your words carefully," Sheriff Coleman advised. "Attempted fraud is one thing, threatening a lady is another." Sarah watched in stunned silence as the sheriff's men disarmed Hawkins' group. Prescott blustered about mistakes and misunderstandings, but the fear in his eyes was real. "Take them away," Sheriff Coleman ordered. "We'll sort this out at the jail." As the men were led out, Hawkins managed one last venomous look at Sarah. "This ain't over, girl. You can't hide behind Rollins forever." "She won't need to," Ethan said, "because if you come near my wife again, they'll never find your body." After the sheriff's departure, an awkward silence filled the parlor. Victoria stood like a queen among commoners, clearly waiting for something. "Thank you," Sarah said finally. "I don't understand why you helped us, but thank you." Victoria's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I didn't do it for you. I did it for them. She nodded toward the children. And for Elizabeth. Elizabeth would have hated what you tried to do, Ethan said harshly. Yes, she would have. Victoria moved toward the door, then paused. She also would have understood why I did it. I lost my sister. Ethan, I couldn't bear the thought of losing them too. Her gaze found Sarah. Take care of them. They deserve better than what life has given them so far. Then she was gone, leaving the wedding party in stunned silence. Well, Judge Patterson said after a moment, that was certainly more excitement than most weddings provide. Shall we continue with the celebration? Rosa bustled off to serve the wedding cake while the children peppered Sarah and Ethan with questions. But Sarah noticed Ethan's tension hadn't eased. His eyes kept moving to the windows, watching. The celebration was subdued, but genuine. The ranch hands offered congratulations and toasts with whatever spirits they could find. Annie insisted on making a speech that mostly consisted of listing all the things she loved about Sarah. Even James offered a grudging welcome to the family that made Sarah's eyes mist. As evening fell, the children were sent to bed despite protests. Rosa and the hands tactfully disappeared, leaving Sarah and Ethan alone for the first time as husband and wife. Not quite the wedding day you dreamed of as a girl, I imagine, Ethan said, pouring whiskey for them both. Sarah accepted the glass gratefully. I stopped dreaming of wedding days when I stood on that platform. This was more than I dared hope for. Hawkins won't give up. Ethan warned, prison won't hold him long, and he's the type to hold a grudge. Then we'll face him when he comes. Sarah set down her glass and moved to her husband. But not tonight. Tonight is ours. Ethan set aside his own glass to pull her close. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, Sarah admitted. But I've been terrified since the day my father died and I realized I was alone in the world. At least now I'm terrified with you. He kissed her then, deeper than the chaste wedding kiss, full of promise and need. When they parted, his eyes were dark with emotion. I love you, Mrs. Rawlins, he said softly. And I love you, Mr. Rawlins. A crash from upstairs broke the moment. Annie's voice carried down, "It wasn't me." Sarah laughed, leaning her forehead against Ethan's chest. Perhaps we should check on them. In a moment, he held her tighter. Let me just hold my wife for a moment. They stood there in the lamplight, holding each other, while the big house settled around them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Hawkins would return eventually. The drought would continue. The ranch would demand its due. But tonight, they were simply Ethan and Sarah Rawlins, beginning their life together. Later, after they'd settled the children, Annie had knocked over a water pitcher reaching for a book. Sarah stood in the doorway of what was now their bedroom. Ethan was already there, looking oddly uncertain. It's strange, he said. I built this room for a marriage, but Elizabeth and I we kept to our separate spaces. Old habits from the cabin days. Sarah crossed to him, taking his hands. Then we'll make new habits, new memories. This is our room now, our life. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again. Hopeful, happy. When Elizabeth died, I thought that part of me died too. Maybe it did, Sarah said gently. But something new grew in its place. Something different, but just as real. They stood at the window, looking out at their land. The riders were gone from the ridge for now. But Sarah noticed Miguel and several hands posted at strategic points, guarding, protecting. Was it worth it? She asked. All the trouble I've brought to your door. Ethan turned her to face him, his expression fierce with love. You brought life back to this house. You gave my children, a mother and me, a reason to be more than just a ghost going through the motions. Yes, Sarah, you're worth everything. A soft knock interrupted them. Tom's voice came through the door. Mr. Rollins' rider coming. Says it's urgent." Ethan sighed, pressing a kiss to Sarah's forehead. The wedding night will have to wait. They found the rider in the kitchen, a young man from a neighboring ranch, dusty and exhausted. "Begging your pardon for the interruption," he said, hat in hand. "But Mr. Morrison sent me. Says you need to know. Hawkins escaped. Shot a deputy and took off. Sheriff's forming a posse, but Morrison figured you'd want to know first." Sarah's blood ran cold. Ethan's face went carefully blank. "How long ago?" 2 hours, maybe 3. Sheriff thinks he's heading for Mexico, but—" The young man glanced at Sarah. "But Morrison thinks different. Thank you for the warning. Rosa will feed you before you go." After the rider left, Ethan began issuing rapid orders. Windows barred, guards doubled, weapons distributed. Sarah found herself checking the loads in a shotgun, marveling at how quickly her wedding day had become a siege. "I should have killed him," Ethan said quietly, watching her. "The first time he looked at you wrong. I should have put him down. Then you'd be the one in jail. And where would that leave us?" Sarah set the shotgun within easy reach and went to him. "We'll handle this like we handle everything else together." "My brave wife," he murmured, pulling her close. "Papa!" Mary's scared voice came from the stairs. All 4 children huddled there in their nightclothes, clearly having heard the commotion. "Come here, all of you," Sarah said, opening her arms. They came, even James, forming a tight knot of family in the kitchen. "Is he coming here?" Tom asked, trying to sound brave. "Maybe," Ethan said honestly. "But if he does, we're ready for him." "I won't let him take Mama Sarah," Annie said fiercely. The casual use of Mama made Sarah's throat tight. "And I won't let him hurt any of you. We protect each other. That's what families do." They spent the night together in the parlor, the children eventually falling asleep in a pile of blankets while the adults kept watch. It wasn't the wedding night Sarah had imagined, but surrounded by her new family, ready to defend what they'd built together, she found it perfect in its own way. As dawn broke over the Texas plains, Ethan squeezed her hand. "No regrets." Sarah looked at the children sleeping peacefully, at the strong man beside her, at the home they would defend with their lives if necessary. "Not one," she said firmly. "Not a single one." Outside, the new day brought new dangers. Hawkins was out there somewhere, nursing his grudges and planning his revenge. But inside the Double R Ranch, the Rollins family faced the dawn united, stronger together than any of them had been alone. And that, Sarah thought, was worth any danger that might come. 2 weeks passed with no sign of Hawkins. The initial siege mentality at the Double R Ranch gradually eased. Though guards still patrolled and no one ventured out alone, Sarah threw herself into her new role as Mrs. Rollins, finding joy in small domestic moments despite the shadow hanging over them. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Sarah was in the kitchen garden with Mary, teaching her to distinguish between herbs, when she heard Annie's laughter from the barn. Too loud, too high, the forced sound of a child trying to be brave. "Stay here," Sarah told Mary, but the girl shook her head, grabbing Sarah's hand. Together they moved toward the barn, Sarah's free hand finding the small pistol Ethan had insisted she carry. Through the open doors, she could see Annie backed against a stall, her little face pale with fear. Jed Hawkins stood before her, swaying slightly, a bottle in one hand. "Pretty little thing, ain't you?" he slurred. "Just like your new mama. Bet you'll grow up to be just as fine." Sarah's blood turned to ice, then fire. She handed Mary the pistol with whispered instructions to run for help, then stepped into the barn. "Let her go, Hawkins." He spun, nearly stumbling, his bloodshot eyes lighting up with malicious glee. Well, the blushing bride herself, come to save the little brat." "Annie, come here," Sarah said calmly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Annie started forward, but Hawkins grabbed her arm. Not roughly, but firmly enough to hold her in place. "Now hold on. The girl and I were just getting acquainted."
"Please,"
Sarah said, hating the pleading in her voice but willing to do anything to get Annie away from him. "She's just a child. Whatever quarrel you have is with me." "That's true enough." Hawkins released Annie with a little shove. "Go on, girl. Run to your papa." Annie ran to Sarah instead, throwing her arms around her waist. Sarah held her tight with one arm, keeping herself between the child and Hawkins.
"Go find Mr. Rollins," she whispered. "Run fast."
Annie hesitated, then fled. Hawkins laughed, taking another swig from his bottle. Touching scene. The whore playing mother. "I'm not a whore," Sarah said evenly. "I am a wife and mother." "Wife," he spat the word. "You were supposed to be mine, bought and paid for until Rollins interfered. No one owns me." "That's so." He moved closer, and Sarah could smell the whiskey and filth on him. "Way I see it, you still owe me, one way or another." Sarah backed up until she hit the barn wall. "Ethan will kill you for this." "Probably." Hawkins set aside the bottle, his movements becoming more focused despite his drunkenness. "But not before I take what's mine." He lunged. Sarah tried to dodge, but his hand caught her dress, tearing the fabric. She struck out wildly, her fist connecting with his jaw, but he barely flinched. "Feisty, I like that." He pressed her against the wall, his hands rough and grasping.
"No."
Sarah brought her knee up hard, catching him where it counted. He doubled over with a curse, and she tried to run, but he caught her ankle, bringing her down into the hay. The fall knocked the wind from her. Hawkins loomed over her, face twisted with rage and pain. "You'll pay for that, girl." "Get away from her." The voice was young but steady. Tom stood in the barn doorway, Ethan's rifle in his hands, pointed squarely at Hawkins. Hawkins laughed. "Boy, you don't have the stones to, Tom fired, the bullet whizzing past Hawkins's ear and into the barn wall. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were determined. "The next one won't miss," Tom said. "Get away from my mother." The word mother seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Sarah's eyes filled with tears even as Hawkins straightened, hands raised mockingly. "Your mother? Huh? That what she's telling you?" He took a step toward Tom. "Let me tell you about your precious mother. Boy, about how I watched them sell her like cattle." How she stood there. The second shot came from behind Tom. Ethan stood there, smoking gun in hand, face carved from granite. The bullet had grazed Hawkins's shoulder, sending him spinning. "Tom, take Sarah to the house," Ethan said, never taking his eyes off Hawkins. "Now." Tom helped Sarah to her feet, both of them shaking. As they passed Ethan, Sarah touched his arm. "Don't kill him. Not for this. We're all right." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Love, rage, pain. "Go!" Sarah let Tom lead her away, but not before she heard Ethan's low voice. "You touched my wife. You threatened my child. Give me one reason not to put you in the ground." Back at the house, chaos reigned. Annie sobbed in Rosa's arms while Mary clung to James, who was trying to load a shotgun with trembling hands. When Sarah appeared, torn dress and hay in her hair, they all rushed to her. "Are you hurt?" Rosa demanded, checking her over with practiced hands. "I'm fine, just shaken." Sarah gathered the children close. "Everyone's all right." "Tom shot at him," Annie said, awe and fear mixing in her voice. "With the big gun." "He was very brave," Sarah agreed, meeting Tom's eyes. "You saved me." Tom flushed, but stood taller. "He wasn't going to hurt you, not while I could stop it." "Where's Ethan?" James asked, still clutching the shotgun. "Dealing with Hawkins," Sarah said carefully. They waited in tense silence, Sarah trying not to imagine what dealing with might mean. She'd asked Ethan not to kill, but she'd seen the look in his eyes, the cold fury of a man pushed past his limits. 20 minutes later, Ethan appeared. His knuckles were bloody, his shirt torn, but he was otherwise unhurt. He went straight to Sarah, pulling her into his arms. "Did he hurt you?" "No." Tom stopped him in time. Ethan turned to Tom, gripping the boy's shoulder. "You did good, son, real good." "Is Hawkins—" Sarah couldn't finish the question. "Alive, tied up in the barn. Miguel's riding for the sheriff." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I wanted to kill him. God help me, I almost did. But you asked me not to, and Tom—" He looked at the boy with pride. "Tom showed me there's strength in mercy, too." "What will happen to him?" Mary asked in her quiet voice. "Prison, this time for certain," Ethan said. "Attempted assault, escape, theft of a horse. He won't see freedom for a long while." But Sarah saw the doubt in his eyes. Men like Hawkins had a way of slipping through the cracks of frontier justice. That night, after the sheriff had taken Hawkins and statements had been given, Sarah found herself unable to sleep. She sat on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the stars. "Can't sleep either," Ethan joined her, moving stiffly from his fight with Hawkins. "I keep thinking about what might have happened. If Tom hadn't come, if Annie had been alone with him longer. But that didn't happen." Ethan pulled her against his side. "We protected each other. The family held—" "He called me a whore," Sarah said quietly. "In front of Annie, and maybe he's not wrong. I was sold. Ethan, that's how we met." "Look at me." His voice was fierce. When she met his eyes, he continued, "You are my wife, the mother of my children. You are the woman who saved Mary's life and taught Tom that strength isn't just about violence. You are the heart of this home. Don't let the poison words of a bitter man make you doubt that." "The children called me mother today," Sarah whispered. "Both Tom and Annie." "Because that's what you are." Ethan kissed her forehead. "What you've been since the day you chose to stay and fight for us instead of running." A soft sound made them turn. 4 small figures stood in the doorway, clearly having snuck from their beds. "We couldn't sleep," Annie said apologetically. "Bad dreams," Mary added. Sarah opened her arms. "Come here, all of you." They piled onto the porch, creating a tangle of limbs and blankets. James produced a slightly squashed sandwich from somewhere, which they shared while watching the stars. "Tell us a story." Annie requested, "A happy one." Sarah thought for a moment. "Once upon a time, there was a family, not a regular family. They didn't all share blood or names at first, but they shared something stronger." "What?" Mary asked. "Choice," Sarah said. They chose each other, every day. When bad men came, they chose to protect each other. When times were hard, they chose to stay together, and that choice made over and over, turned them into something unbreakable. "Is that us?" Tom asked, though he clearly knew the answer. "That's us," Ethan confirmed, his arm tightening around Sarah. They sat there until the children dozed off, one by one. Ethan and Tom carried the younger ones to bed while Sarah tucked them in, whispering prayers and promises of safety. Back in their room, Ethan pulled Sarah close. "Today, when I saw him near you, when I thought—" His voice broke. "But you didn't lose me," Sarah soothed. "I'm here. We're all here." "I love you," he said against her hair. "More than I thought possible to love again." "Show me," Sarah whispered. Their lovemaking was gentle but intense, an affirmation of life and connection after coming so close to loss. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. "He'll be back," Sarah said eventually. "Prison won't hold him forever, and he'll come back." "Maybe," Ethan agreed. "But we'll be ready, and he'll find not just a man protecting his property, but a family protecting their own. That's a very different fight." A soft knock interrupted them. "Mama, Papa." Annie's voice was small. Can I sleep with you just tonight? Sarah glanced at Ethan, who nodded. Come on, sweetheart. Annie scrambled between them, sighing contentedly. Within minutes, Mary appeared, then James supporting a sleepy Tom. Bad dreams, James mumbled, clearly embarrassed but unwilling to be alone. Soon their bed meant for two held six, a jumble of arms and legs and quiet breathing. It should have been uncomfortable, but Sarah felt only peace. I love our family, Annie murmured, already half asleep. Me too, came the chorus from the others. Sarah met Ethan's eyes over the children's heads, seeing her own wonder reflected there. From that terrible day on the auction platform to this moment, surrounded by love and trust, it seemed impossible. Yet here they were. Sleep, Ethan whispered. I'll keep watch. But Sarah knew he wouldn't be watching alone. Tom would wake periodically, checking the windows. James would patrol in his socks, thinking no one noticed. Even little Mary would lift her head at unfamiliar sounds, ready to alert the others. They were a family forged in hardship but strengthened by love. Hawkins had tried to destroy that today and failed. Others might try in the future, but lying there in the tangle of her family, Sarah knew with bone-deep certainty that they would face whatever came. Together. Mama, Mary's sleepy voice broke the silence. Are you crying? Sarah touched her cheek, finding it wet with tears she hadn't noticed. Happy tears, sweetheart. Just happy tears. Oh, good. Mary snuggled closer. Love you, Mama. Love you too, baby. Love you all. Outside, the Texas night stretched vast and full of dangers. But inside the Rollins home, 6 hearts beat as one, creating a fortress no enemy could breach. Not Hawkins, not drought, not all the hardships the frontier could throw at them. They had chosen each other, and that choice made them invincible. As sleep finally claimed her, Sarah's last thought was a prayer of gratitude for Ethan's courage in saving her that day, for Tom's bravery in the barn, for Annie's fierce love and Mary's quiet strength in James's protective instincts, for Rosa's wisdom and Miguel's loyalty, for this family, patched together from broken pieces but whole nonetheless, for home. The drought came with a vengeance that summer, turning the Texas plains into a furnace of cracked earth and withered dreams. The Double R Ranch, despite Ethan's careful management, felt the squeeze as water sources dwindled and grass turned to dust. Cattle began to die, their carcasses dotting the landscape like grim monuments to nature's cruelty. Sarah stood on the porch, watching dust devils dance across what used to be the south pasture. 3 months had passed since Hawkins's attack, 3 months of relative peace that now seemed like a distant dream. The real enemy wasn't a man this time. It was the merciless sun and the absent rain. Mama Sarah, look! Annie ran up, clutching something in her small hands. I found a flower, a real one. Sarah knelt to examine the tiny bloom, a stubborn wildflower that had somehow survived in the shade of the water trough. It's beautiful, sweetheart. How did it manage? It wanted to live, Annie said simply, like us. The child's words hit deeper than intended. Yes, they all wanted to live, but wanting wasn't always enough. Not when the wells were running low and the nearest water source was 2 days' ride away. Sarah. Ethan approached, his face grim beneath the coating of dust. He'd been out since dawn, checking the herds, and the slump of his shoulders told her everything. We lost 20 more head. The water hole in the eastern section is completely dry. How many does that make? Near 200. He removed his hat, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. At this rate, we'll be lucky to have half the herd by winter. Sarah reached for his hand, feeling the calluses and cuts from his endless labor. We'll manage. We always do. Do we? For the first time since she'd known him? Ethan sounded defeated. I'm watching everything my family built turn to dust. The money's running low, the cattle are dying, and I've got 6 mouths to feed with nothing but pride and stubbornness.
7 mouths,
Sarah corrected gently, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. Come, spring. Ethan went very still, his eyes widening.
You're...
Rosa confirmed it this morning. Sarah watched emotions chase across his face. Joy, fear, wonder, worry. I know the timing is terrible. He silenced her with a kiss, fierce and desperate. The timing is perfect. Don't you see life finds a way, even here, even now? He pressed his forehead to hers. A baby. Our baby. Our baby, she confirmed, then added with a smile. Though I should warn you, the children have already started arguing about names. That evening, the family gathered for a meager supper, beans and cornbread, with precious little else. The garden Sarah had struggled to maintain had yielded some tomatoes and squash, but barely enough to supplement their dwindling supplies. I have news, Sarah announced, catching Ethan's eye. He nodded encouragingly. Are we moving? James asked immediately, fear flashing in his eyes. Is the ranch failing? No, sweetheart, no one's moving. Sarah took a breath. You're going to have a new brother or sister come spring. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before Annie shrieked with delight. A baby, a real baby. Can I name it? Can I hold it? Will it sleep in my room? One question at a time. Ethan laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in weeks. Tom, ever practical, frowned thoughtfully. Babies need milk and special food. Will we have enough? We'll make sure of it, Sarah assured him, though privately she shared his concern. Mary climbed into Sarah's lap, placing a gentle hand on her stomach. Is it lonely in there? I don't think so, Sarah said softly. It can hear us talking, feel us moving. It knows it's loved. James had been quiet through the exchange, his face unreadable. Finally, he spoke. It'll be the first one that's really ours. All of ours. I mean, blood and everything. Something in his voice made Sarah's heart ache. James, this baby won't make any of you less mine. You're all my children, blood or not. Promise. Promise. That night, after the children were asleep, Ethan and Sarah walked the ranch boundaries. The moon was full, casting silver light over the parched landscape. We need to make some hard decisions, Ethan said finally. The ranch can't support the current herd. Not without water. I'll have to sell most of them. Take whatever price I can get. Will it be enough? To survive, maybe. To thrive. He shook his head. We need rain or we need a miracle. Sarah thought of the tiny flower Annie had found. What about the old Henderson place? Didn't they have a spring-fed pond? They did, before Henderson dammed it up for his mining operation. Place has been abandoned for 2 years now. Ethan paused, considering. Though, I suppose... What? If the dam could be removed, carefully, the spring might flow again. It would mean water for the eastern pastures. Maybe enough to save what's left of the herd. Then we remove it, Sarah said simply. It's not that simple. It would take men, equipment, expertise I don't have, and money we definitely don't have. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, what about the pearl combs Mary's mother's combs that I wore at our wedding? They must be worth something. I'm not selling your wedding gifts to... They're just things, Ethan, beautiful things, but still just things. Our family, this ranch, our future, that's what matters. He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. How did I get lucky enough to find you? You bought me, remember? She teased, then grew serious. We'll get through this, all of us, together. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Judge Patterson arrived just after breakfast, his usually jovial face creased with concern. Ethan, Mrs. Rollins, he greeted them. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Sarah's hand found Ethan's, bracing for whatever was coming. There's been a petition filed in Austin, the judge continued, challenging your guardianship of the children.
What?
Sarah gasped.
By whom?
Victoria Thornton. I'm afraid she claims that the current financial difficulties make this an unsuitable environment for children. She's offering to take them in herself.
Over my dead body. Ethan growled.
That may be what it comes to, Judge Patterson said grimly. She has powerful friends, and with the drought affecting everyone, there's sympathy for her position. A wealthy, established household versus a failing ranch.
We're not failing,
Sarah said fiercely. We're struggling, yes, but we're together. Those children have a home here, a real family. I don't disagree, the judge assured her.
But the court in Austin might see it differently.
You'll need to present your case. Prove that the children are better off here despite the hardships. After the judge left, Sarah found the children huddled on the stairs, having clearly heard everything. She can't take us, can she? Annie asked, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Thornton can't make us leave.
Not while I have breath in my body,
Sarah promised, gathering them close. But what if the court says, Tom started. Then we'll fight the court, Ethan said firmly.
We'll fight anyone who tries to tear this family apart.
That afternoon, Sarah made a decision. While Ethan was out with the herds, she packaged up the pearl combs and rode to town. The jeweler, Mr. Goldstein, examined them with his loupe, his expression appreciative. These are excellent quality, he said. European. If I'm not mistaken, I can offer you $300. It was more than Sarah had hoped. Sold. With part of the money, she purchased supplies, flour, beans, salt, and precious sugar. With the rest, she visited the land office. I want to know about water rights, she told the clerk, specifically regarding the old Henderson property. An hour later, she had the information she needed. The Henderson property had been seized for back taxes but never resold. The water rights were in limbo, available to whoever could pay the tax debt and filing fees.
How much?
She asked. $75, ma'am. But I should warn you, that land's worthless without water access. Sarah smiled.
We'll see about that.
She returned home to find chaos. Victoria Thornton's carriage sat in front of the house, and raised voices carried from inside. Clearly inadequate, Victoria's shrill tone cut through the air. Look at them, thin, dirty, working like field hands. They're healthy and happy. Ethan's voice, dangerously low. Sarah entered to find Victoria examining the children like livestock, her nose wrinkled in disgust. Two men in city suits stood behind her, looking uncomfortable.
Ah, the new Mrs. Rollins.
Victoria's smile was venomous.
Still playing house, I see, though not for much longer.
Get out of my home, Sarah said calmly. Your home? This drought-stricken wasteland, Victoria laughed. These gentlemen are from the court. They're here to assess the children's living conditions. One of the men stepped forward apologetically. We're required to investigate all claims of child endangerment. Ma'am, I'm sure you understand. What I understand, Sarah said, moving to stand with her family, is that some people measure a home by its wealth and others by its love. Look around. Gentlemen, yes, we're struggling. Yes, times are hard, but these children are loved, protected, and cherished. Can Mrs. Thornton say the same about her empty mansion?
Empty?
Victoria sputtered.
I have everything a child could want.
Except warmth, James said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. You came to Mama Lizzie's funeral in that fancy black dress, but you didn't cry. Not once. You looked at us like we were problems to be solved, not children who'd lost everything. And now, Tom added, standing beside his brother, you want to take us from the only real family we've ever known. Why so? You can dress us up and parade us around like dolls. Mary, usually so quiet, spoke up, "We choose to stay," with Mama Sarah and Papa Ethan. "Children don't get to choose," Victoria started. "Yes, we do," Annie interrupted, her little chin jutting out stubbornly. "We choose love over money. We choose family over fancy. We choose them." The court representatives exchanged glances. The older one cleared his throat. "Mrs. Thornton, while we appreciate your concern, we see no evidence of abuse or neglect here. The children appear well cared for and clearly devoted to their guardians." "But the drought," Victoria protested, "affects everyone in Texas." The man continued. "If financial hardship was grounds for removing children, half the state would be orphaned. We'll file our report accordingly." Victoria's face turned an alarming shade of red.
"This isn't over. When this ranch fails, and it will fail, I'll be waiting."
After she stormed out, the representatives lingering just long enough to apologize for the intrusion, the family collapsed together in the parlor. "We won?" Annie asked in wonder. "For now," Ethan said, but he was smiling. "You all were magnificent. Absolutely magnificent." "We learned from the best," Tom said, looking at Sarah with such love it took her breath away. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Sarah presented Ethan with the deed to the Henderson property water rights. "How?" he asked, stunned. "The Combs," she admitted. "And before you protest, look at what we got in exchange. Water for the cattle, hope for the ranch, and proof that we're not giving up." He studied the deed. Then her face. "You sold your wedding gift to save our ranch."
"Our ranch, our family, our future."
She placed his hand on her stomach. "All of ours. Worth more than all the pearls in the ocean." That night, as drought lightning flickered on the horizon, promising nothing, delivering less, Sarah lay surrounded by her family. The children had again migrated to their room, creating their now familiar pile of security and love.
"Tell us about the baby,"
Mary requested sleepily. "Well," Sarah began, "when spring comes and the rains return, and they will return, the baby will arrive. And he or she will be born into a family that knows how to fight for each other, how to sacrifice for each other, and how to love without conditions. And we'll teach it everything," Annie added, "like how to ride horses and find flowers in the desert and stand up to mean ladies in fancy dresses." "All important skills," Ethan agreed solemnly, making the children giggle as they drifted off to sleep. Sarah noticed something through the window. Clouds, real clouds, heavy and dark, building on the horizon.
"Ethan,"
she whispered, "Look." He followed her gaze, and she felt him tense with hope. "Could be nothing, might pass us by like all the others. Or it might not." Sarah said, "Have faith." "I do," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "In us." The next morning, Sarah woke to a sound she'd almost forgotten. Rain on the roof, gentle at first, then steadier. Then a proper downpour that had the children dancing on the porch in their nightclothes.
"Mama, Papa, it's raining,"
Annie shouted, spinning with her arms outstretched. Sarah and Ethan joined them, letting the water soak through their clothes, washing away dust and fear and doubt. The drought wasn't over. One storm wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start, a promise. "We're going to make it," Tom said, rain streaming down his face like tears of joy.
"Yes, we are,"
Sarah agreed, one hand on her growing miracle, the other reaching for her family. All of us, together. Later, Miguel would report that the rain had filled several water holes and given the remaining cattle strength to continue. Ethan would organize the expedition to the Henderson property, carefully removing the dam to release the spring's flow. The ranch would slowly, painfully, begin to recover. But that was all in the future. Right now, there was only this moment, a family standing together in the rain, choosing hope over despair, love over loss, and each other over everything else the world might offer. The drought had tested them and found them stronger than the sum of their parts. Whatever came next, new babies, old enemies, nature's whims, they would face it as they faced everything united, unbroken and unafraid. Spring came to the Double R Ranch with a vengeance of beauty, as if nature sought to apologize for the harsh drought. The Henderson Spring, once freed, had indeed flowed again, creating a lifeline that saved not just the cattle but the very soul of the ranch. Green grass carpeted what had been barren earth, and Sarah's garden burst with life. She stood in that garden now, one hand supporting her heavy belly, the other holding a basket of early vegetables. At 8 months pregnant, every movement was an effort, but she wouldn't trade this life for anything. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, and she smiled.
"Easy there, little one,"
she murmured.
"You'll be out soon enough."
Mama Sarah. Mary ran up, her face glowing with health and happiness.
"Papa says to come quick. There's a man at the gate, and he has papers."
Sarah's heart sank. Papers rarely meant good news. She followed Mary to the front of the house, where Ethan stood facing a well-dressed stranger. The children had gathered on the porch, protective and wary. "Mrs. Rollins." The man tipped his hat. "I'm Edward Patterson, from the Railroad Commission. I'm here to make you an offer." "We're not interested in selling," Ethan said flatly.
"Perhaps you should hear the offer first."
Patterson smiled. "The railroad needs to run through this area. Your land sits right on the ideal route. We're prepared to pay handsomely, enough to set you up anywhere you'd like, in considerable comfort." He named a figure that made Sarah's eyes widen. It was more money than most people saw in a lifetime.
"That's generous,"
she managed. "It's insulting," Ethan countered. "This land isn't for sale at any price." Patterson's smile faltered. "Mr. Rollins, I urge you to reconsider. The railroad is coming through one way or another. We can take your land through eminent domain if necessary, and the compensation would be far less generous."
"Is that a threat?"
Tom stepped forward, fists clenched. "It's a reality," Patterson said smoothly. "But I'd rather this be a mutually beneficial arrangement. Think of your children, your coming baby. Wouldn't they be better off in a nice house in San Antonio or Dallas, with proper schools and opportunities?" Sarah felt the baby kick again, harder this time, as if protesting the very idea. She looked at her family, at Ethan, steady as the earth itself, at Tom, growing into a fine young man, at James, finally learning to trust, at Mary, blooming like her garden, at Annie, fierce and bright as a flame. "Mr. Patterson," she said quietly, "what would you say if I told you that everything valuable in our lives is right here on this land?" "I'd say you were being sentimental, ma'am." "Then you'd be wrong." Sarah moved to stand beside Ethan, their children flanking them. "You see buildings and acreage. We see the tree where Elizabeth Rollins is buried, where these children go to talk to their first mother. We see the barn where Tom found his courage and James learned to trust again. We see the garden where Mary discovered she could make things grow and Annie learned that life persists even in drought." She paused, gathering strength. "We see the very earth where our children took their first steps as a family, where they learned they were worthy of love. Money can't buy that, Mr. Patterson. The railroad can't replace it." Patterson looked uncomfortable. "The commission won't be swayed by emotion. Mrs. Rollins." "Then maybe they'll be swayed by this." A new voice interrupted. Judge Patterson, no relation to the railroad man, approached on horseback, accompanied by several other riders. Sarah recognized the mayor, the sheriff, and, surprisingly, Victoria Thornton. "Judge," Ethan nodded. "What brings you out here?" "Community business." The judge dismounted. "Edward, I believe you've been misrepresenting your authority. The Railroad Commission has approved 3 potential routes, not one." And they've specifically stated they won't use eminent domain against established family ranches. Edward Patterson's face flushed. The Commission's preferences are quite clear, Victoria interrupted, stunning everyone. I've been in correspondence with them myself. I own land along the southern route land I'm willing to sell at a reasonable price. Land that doesn't have families depending on it. Sarah stared at her former enemy. Why would you help us? Victoria's expression was unreadable. Because I finally understood something. My sister loved this place, these children, this life. Who am I to say her choice was wrong? She looked at the children. You belong here. I see that now. Edward Patterson left shortly after, muttering about lawyers and complications. The other visitors lingered. The mayor shaking Ethan's hand and congratulating Sarah on her coming baby. After they'd gone, Victoria remained. I owe you an apology, she said stiffly. All of you. I let grief make me cruel. Grief makes us all do things, Sarah said gently. The question is what we do once we recognize it. Victoria nodded, then surprised them all by kneeling to Annie's level. Your Mama Lizzie was my sister. That makes me your aunt. In a way, I'd like to know you better, if you'll let me. Annie, never one to hold grudges, hugged her impulsively. Okay, but you have to be nice. Mama Sarah says family is always nice to each other. That evening, as the family celebrated their victory, Sarah felt the first contraction. She'd been having practice pains for weeks, but this was different, deeper, more insistent. Ethan, she said quietly, not wanting to alarm the children, I think it's time. The next hours passed in a blur. Rosa took charge, sending Ethan for the midwife and keeping the children calm but busy. Sarah labored through the night, drawing strength from the sounds of her family just beyond the door. Ethan's pacing, the children's whispered prayers. Life continuing around the ancient rhythm of birth. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Elizabeth Sarah Rollins entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears of joy to every eye. A girl, Rosa announced, placing the baby in Sarah's arms. Healthy and perfect. Ethan sat beside them, tears streaming down his weathered face. She's beautiful, like her mother. Can we come in? Annie's voice piped from the hallway. We promise to be quiet. Come meet your sister, Sarah called. They filed in, eyes wide with wonder. Even James, usually so guarded, couldn't hide his amazement. She's so small, Mary whispered. You were smaller, Rosa told her, making the girl beam. What's her name? Tom asked. Sarah and Ethan exchanged glances. They'd discussed this. Elizabeth Sarah, for both mothers who love you. Lizzie, Annie decided. Baby Lizzie. As the children took turns holding their sister, carefully supervised by Rosa. Sarah leaned against Ethan, exhausted but content. Our family's complete now, she murmured. Complete but never finished. He corrected. Room to grow. Always. The years that followed brought their share of challenges and joys. The railroad did come through, following Victoria's southern route, bringing prosperity to the region without destroying what mattered most. The Double R Ranch thrived, becoming known for both its cattle and its hospitality. Tom grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the ranch operations. He married a school teacher from town, giving Sarah and Ethan their first grandchildren. James found his calling in the law, using his sharp mind to help families keep their lands against corporate encroachment. He never forgot what it meant to nearly lose everything. Mary discovered a gift for healing, studying with a local doctor and becoming a midwife herself, bringing life into the world with gentle hands and a generous heart. Annie, irrepressible as always, became a teacher, filling young minds with stories and dreams and the firm belief that families came in all shapes. And Lizzie, raised in a house full of love and laughter, grew up knowing she was the thread that bound them all even tighter together. Through it all, Sarah and Ethan stood as the heart of it all, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered droughts and floods, market crashes and boom times, always together, always choosing each other. On their 20th anniversary, they stood in the garden Sarah had coaxed from dead earth, surrounded by children and grandchildren and the friends who'd become family.
"Do you ever regret it?"
Victoria asked. She'd become a regular visitor over the years, the stern aunt who secretly spoiled the children. The life you might have had if you'd taken that railroad money. Sarah looked around at the faces she loved, at the land that had become part of her soul, at the man who'd bought her freedom and given her his heart. "How can you regret choosing love?" she asked simply. That night, after the celebration had ended and the house had settled into sleep, Sarah and Ethan sat on their porch, as had become their custom. The stars wheeled overhead, unchanged by all the human drama below. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, "about that day at the auction." "Oh, best $300 I ever spent," he said, making her laugh. "Is that all I'm worth to you, $300? He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her silver-touched hair. "You're worth everything, every struggle, every joy, every minute of these 20 years. You gave me back my life. Sarah Rollins, you gave us all life." "We gave each other life," she corrected. "That's what families do." A coyote howled in the distance, the sound no longer lonely, but simply part of the vast tapestry of their world. Inside the house, their children and grandchildren slept safe and loved. The land stretched out around them, no longer threatening but nurturing, a partner in their lives rather than an adversary. "Make me yours tonight," Sarah whispered, echoing words from long ago but with new meaning now, not pleading but claiming, not desperate but certain. "You've been mine since the moment you stood on that platform with your chin high," Ethan said, "and I've been yours since the moment I realized I couldn't let you go. Tonight, tomorrow, forever. We chose each other, and we keep choosing each other. Every day," Sarah agreed. "That's the secret. Isn't it not the grand gestures or the dramatic moments, but the daily choice to love, to stay, to build something lasting?" They sat in comfortable silence, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a life worth living. The Double R Ranch stood around them, no longer just a collection of buildings and land, but a testament to the power of choice, of love, of family forged in hardship and strengthened by joy. Years later, when Sarah and Ethan had passed on to whatever comes next, their grandchildren would find a wooden sign in the attic, weathered but still readable, "This land is not for sale." But they'd also find Sarah's journal, the last entry written in her careful hand. "They say I was bought for $300, sold to clear a debt. But the truth is, I was purchased by love and paid for with courage. We all were, every soul who found their way to this ranch, this family, this life. We chose each other, again and again, through drought and plenty, sorrow and joy. And in that choosing, we found freedom none of us had imagined possible. May those who come after us remember family isn't made by blood or law or circumstance. It's made by choice, one day at a time, one love at a time, forever and always." The journal entry was signed simply Sarah Bennett Rollins, wife, mother, and grateful witness to the miraculous ordinary. And below that, in Ethan's firm hand, chosen not once but every day, E.R. The Double R Ranch still stands, though the world around it has changed beyond recognition. But the lessons learned there, the love shared there, the choices made there, those endure, passed down through generations like precious heirlooms, more valuable than any pearl combs or railroad money could ever be. For in the end, that's what the story of Sarah and Ethan Rollins teaches us, that love isn't a feeling, but a choice. That family isn't an accident, but a decision. And that sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as hardships. waiting for brave souls to transform them into blessings. The Texas sun still sets over that land, painting the sky in impossible colors. And sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can almost hear the echo of children's laughter, of whispered promises, of lives lived fully and well. The sound of people who chose love over fear, hope over despair, and each other over everything else the world might offer. Chosen not once, but every day, forever and always. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, family, and redemption in the American frontier. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this tale meant to you. If you enjoyed this Wild West love story, please subscribe to Wild West Night and hit the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover these heartfelt stories of the Old West. Until next time, partners.